Call to order the North Andover Planning Board, the July 21st meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. Gene, can you take roll?
Present.
O'Connor.
I'm here.
John Simons.
Here.
Sean Kevlahan.
Here.
Peter Boynton.
Aye.
Kate Kelly. Here.
Great. All right, so starting from the top of the list. Continued public hearing, 520 Great Pond Road, North Andover Country Club. Gene, can you give us an update there?
Sure. At the last meeting, they had agreed to continue to the 11th. I have received an email communication. Last meeting, I informed you they were going to look at pulling back the scope. Well, they're going to pull it all the way back to only repaving the existing parking lot. And so I anticipate they're going to request to withdraw the application at the next meeting on the 11th.
Okay, so should we carry it to the next meeting then
Yep.
for the new request?
It
Okay.
was continued to that at the last meeting. We skipped a meeting because we didn't think they'd have time to come back with anything.
Perfect. All right, so we'll continue that to the next meeting. And we'll start with a new public hearing, 492 Sutton Street, also known as 64 Terminal Road. City of Lawrence Municipal Airport Commission, application for site plan review. Yeah, and maybe just kick it over to Gene. Maybe give us a little bit brief on the project.
Sure. So this is a new public hearing opening this evening. The improvements will allow for the airport to continue providing services including emergency medical care, law enforcement operations, flight training, and general aviation needs of the region. The subject property is 400-plus acres. The property and campus are substantially developed with numerous existing buildings, structures, and infrastructure improvements, and is home to a variety of existing mixed uses in addition to the airport operations. The site is currently served by both municipal water and sewer. The project consists of a complete demolition of the administration building, which is at the end of Terminal Road, and construction of a new one-story, 7,069 square feet administration building on substantially the same footprint. The application is supplemented with a request for a parking reduction special permit. The proposed restaurant space has 39 spaces, and the office business space requires 14 spaces. However, the applicants applied for a reduction relief of 7 spaces for the office use based on airport operational characteristics, yielding a required total of 46 spaces with the relief. And they have proposed 46 spaces. Stormwater management consists of low-impact improvements, including a small stormwater basin to manage peak flows resulting from off-site runoff over the project site, vegetation detention areas within the main parking island, and pollutant removals achieved by manufactured cartridge filtration system prior to discharge into the existing downstream drainage system. The Conservation Department and the Police Department have confirmed they do not have any concerns with the project. The applicant has requested a waiver for the traffic study requirement. Simply, the project's replacing an existing building with identical uses and a marginally larger facility. No new uses are introduced and no meaningful change to the trip generation is anticipated. They've also requested a waiver for strict conformance with landscaping requirements, so that too is a special permit that they've applied for. And that's due to the sensitivity of wildlife inhabiting areas under FAA regulations. So landscaping is limited to the requirements of the stormwater management system to function as designed. The parking lot is a retrofit of an existing parking facility, and landscaping has been proposed where feasible within the existing reconstructed landscape islands. And finally, they've requested waivers for both the fiscal impact analysis and the community impact analysis.
Great. Thanks, Gene. To the applicant?
Good evening.
Could you state your name and affiliation, please?
My name is Lindsay DeTono. I'm with McClure Engineering. I'm an engineer and team leader with McClure. I have a short presentation here, and I would like to introduce with me as well members of the design team. Philip Cox from Cox Aviation and Katie Ferrier from Fenwick McCready Architecture.
Can I ask where your company's based out of?
Based out of Boston.
Thanks.
Yep, Boston and Portsmouth, actually. Yep. Go ahead, Jean. We can. So I will just walk through kind of the site overview, the project, and then go through some of the requirements of the zoning regulations and the requested waivers. So the project here at 492 Sutton Street, accessed by Terminal Road, as Jean stated, zoned I2. And in this image here, you see the overall project area, as well as in the dashed line there, the really limits of the project disturbance for this project. Also pointing out a couple of projects that came before you not too long ago in the past couple of years, the hangar expansion project and the lacrosse facility on the property within a leased area. So now zooming in on the project limits itself, we're looking at the existing, of course, and so you can see the existing administration building there, 1950s era building, about 4,600 square feet. Inside there's office spaces for the administration staff and tenant office and the restaurant tenant space. There's a 28 space parking lot, and that count is strictly in the areas I'm pointing to on that image with the arrows, so in the main administration building parking lot. So as mentioned, we're here for site plan review, special permit, as well as a special permit due to the reduction in parking and modification of the landscaping requirements, which we will discuss a bit later in the presentation. Quickly, just wanted to state that the dimensional standards of the I-2 zone, as far as this project goes, are fully compliant. The project, given that it's in the similar footprint, not changing anything related to the property or the frontage, not changing setbacks more than in a very, very minor way, and complying with the maximum height, which existing building 16 feet approximately, this building 19 and 55 feet is allowed. So complying with all the dimensional requirements of I-2.
I have a question. Maybe it's related to this, or maybe it's later in your presentation. I think when you're saying it's similar to the current sort of perimeter and setbacks, the facility that has been there had a customer seating area on the airport side of the building with, of course, the appropriate security fencing. And at least when I went through your presentation, I didn't see that. There's no more fenced customer seating on the airport side. Is that correct?
There is an area, kind of a concrete plaza area, and we can look at that. You'll be able to see that in more detail in
Great,
some of the
thank you.
imagery. Sure. So this is just kind of a bullet list of what we will go through in the imagery. Essentially, demolition of the existing building, 4,600 square feet. Construction of the new building, about 7,000, just over 7,000 square feet. A total of 46 parking spaces, 5 of which will be EV ready, so no chargers installed as part of this project, but EV ready and meeting the requirements. ADA compliant pedestrian access, utility improvements, extension or replacement, and I can go through each of those with you. Stormwater management improvements, and then site features such as the airport security fencing, flagpole relocation, and various improvements that we can look at in more detail. So this image might help a bit. So what you see here is you can very clearly see the existing in the background in the aerial. So everything you see as kind of the aerial is existing. There's a light dashed black line around the limits of where the contractor will be disturbing for this project. And so you can see, let's talk kind of the view north here. So air side is kind of to the north of the building. Within that footprint of the building I'm showing, which is kind of orange, that's the new building. You can see the limits of the existing building in that dashed black line inside. So you can see how it relates to the existing size. What you were just referring to between the building and the airside space will be a small concrete plaza area which can be used by the tenant. There's also a door on the back side. I can show you that in the elevations as well. But it's essentially a way to access through the security gate from that side of the building, as well as for folks to sit if the restaurant tenant so chooses to put tables and such out there.
And so, having been there before, there was a way for aircraft parked on the airside to enter that building from the airside through the appropriate security doors. And that access for people coming out of aircraft on the airside into the facility, that will still be present?
Yes, I understand your question now. There is a gate you can see Gina's pointing to on the screen there.
I'm not sure I can see it.
I'm
but
sorry.
I
yeah.
take your word
Yeah,
for
I'm
it.
sorry, right. I can see it.
Yeah.
There's a door on in the gate on the backside
Okay.
between the building and the
Thank you.
And the So continuing around here, you can see the area that's sort of shaded in gray is the reconstructed parking lot limits. And you can see the grassed, landscaped, vegetated island in the center there. And then as you sort of cross the existing driveway, basically it's the location of a proposed stormwater basin and then loam and seed of the disturbed areas there. So the landscaping that we're going to talk about in just a bit is limited to the center parking island that's being reconstructed. It's also going to be used as a stormwater area. And then all the other areas that are disturbed that are not proposed to be, building or pavement will be loamed and seeded. All right, so just a couple of images showing the building. This is from the parking lot side, and then the next slide will show you from the air side.
So this is, I think, where I was confused because I couldn't see that fencing on the air side, but the fencing would be where this image is taken from.
Yeah, the fencing is probably where you're kind of standing if you're,
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you.
Yep.
And just a quick question, I mean, is the only new lighting that, I guess, that you're designing for is just on the building, or is there separate lighting? That
Correct,
goes-
just the
Yeah,
building sconces, and then there's existing lighting on the poles coming up Terminal Road.
Got it. And then like the Lawrence Municipal Airport sign, that's not illuminated?
Correct, it's not illuminated.
Okay.
We're
Sorry, can you come up to the podium, I'm sorry, and just state your name and affiliation, please?
I'm Katie Barrier with Pretty Architecture. So this is the air side view. The land side, the signage, actually, Jean, do you mind, can I ask you to go back really quickly?
Slide back.
Thank you. So the signage is attached to the building. There will be a small amount of lighting for that sign. And then on the air side, there is some lighting, just uplighting to the signage.
What are the materials?
For the building,
Yes, in the roof.
so it's primarily, the exterior facade is brick. The building construction is CLT. Sorry, I'm going to lose my things here. So we've got glulam beams, that's what you're seeing there for the structure, and the decking is CLT, cross-laminated timber. So it's effectively about a 4-inch slab of wood, but that is the roof structure. Within the building, there is some supplemental steel. But what you're seeing here for the envelope, it's brick and some curtain wall.
And what is the view from when you're driving in off of the main road, which is, is that the view you see?
It is, but to be, clear, Terminal Road, is 100 plus feet longer. So this is kind of more from the, accessible parking spaces. So this is pretty close to the building.
And is the flagpole going to be about where this image is taken from?
Yes. So actually,
Yeah, it's being relocated to the front of the
Yep.
building, so, exactly.
Yep, that's
Okay.
exactly right there.
Yep.
So
Thank you.
Yep.
it'll be closer to the building, not in the island.
Okay.
And what is that on the right side of the entrance? Is that on this roof? Is that by any chance solar?
It is not. It's mechanical screening, or it's screening for some mechanical units. So the way the building is set up, you see the entrance right through. That's a straight shot right through the building. Everything to the right is part of the restaurant space. So there was an RFP that was listed. There were applicants for that. That's being handled by the airport currently. So that will be a tenant space that will be fit out by them. Based on the schedule of the project, both the base building as well as the restaurant being separate, we're providing kind of the base amount of lighting and mechanical that's required for a shell space. So when the restaurateur, goes through their efforts of designing it and fitting it out with their own contractor, they will need some additional mechanical for that. So we've added screening here just so that when that happens, there's something to kind of just take the edge off of it.
So is what we see there that's higher, are those the mechanicals? Or is there some sort of parapet that shields them? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
So what you see at the front, all the way to the front of the building, there is a very small parapet. So that is just that's metal, metal trim. The part that's taller, it's approximately 6 feet high. It's a screen, it's perforated metal, so it allows air to flow through it. It's not acoustical. Oftentimes with an acoustical screen, you have a lot more thickness because you're concerned about, the sound. This is really just more it's just decorative. So the units that will be back there will be some decent size condensing units.
So these are a buffer to that?
Correct, yes.
Okay, okay.
Decorative.
And there's no solar or no, it's just, is it solar ready?
Solar ready, yes. So, yes. So solar ready, yes. So as part of that, there is a certain amount of I'll say IT infrastructure, conduit, and pipe to provide for that PV when that happens. We did do a layout as well to provide to show. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head to tell you what that was, but there is a layout of where the panels could be proposed for the roof.
But the airport or whoever's, the airport's not here to.
No, there was a conflict, so, sorry, I'll let you jump in.
Phil Cox, I'm the owner's project manager for the airport. Francisco apologizes he couldn't be here tonight because he is camping with his children, and hopefully he did not get caught in the downpour. We're obviously trying to watch the budget on the project. Being a public procurement, it is always mindful of our overall budget on it. When we put all the buildings are put in as solar ready. When we get bids back in, one of the things we look at is the car charging and the solar that we'd be able to put on it. We do that once we get the bids in and we have a construction budget. If we have remaining funds available to do the solar, we would, and we would do it as a change order to the project.
And these are state funds or federal funds?
They are state funded.
But there's no incentive to put in
There's
solar.
currently no incentives for the solar in Massachusetts anymore.
Okay, thank you.
And I didn't catch it. What's the composition of the roof you guys are putting on?
The roof structure is CLT, cross-laminated timber.
Got it.
But on top of that, it's a pretty standard TPO roofing membrane.
Mm-hmm. And the stormwater runoff, is that going to downspouts somewhere?
Yep, there's a series of them, and unfortunately this view is probably not going to really highlight any of them very well. In the kind of upper left-hand corner, plan upper north, I know there's a downspout in that corner, and there are a few others separated around the building. Probably a plan is a little bit better to.
They're plumbing internal and they're plumbed, so I can show you where the stormwater's all kind of being plumbed to.
Is the roof membrane colored light to reflect light and heat, or is it black?
It's definitely not black. Generally, we kind of look between some version of off-white and light gray, just depending on the manufacturer that gets submitted as part of the public building, and looking at a number of metrics to see, what's going to be the give us the best kind of bang for our buck as far as not being blindingly light. White can actually be really troublesome for glare, so generally light gray is pretty common.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, so we will move on to the site plan. Just kind of showing you some of the elements we've talked about. You can see the security fencing a little better in this view. So behind the building, the security fence will remain existing kind of to the right side of this view where the existing gate is, and then new fencing will be installed around into the back of the building, and then from the front of the building tying into the existing around the perimeter. I've highlighted in yellow here the EV-ready parking spaces, and you can also see kind of all the entrances into the building with the circles around the building here.
So just a quick question. Are you planning to essentially repave everything and then stripe? Is that the intent?
Yeah, the area that's kind of colored in gray there is what you'll see is what will be repaved and restriped.
Got it. And again, as I might have asked this question already, is there existing lighting in that parking lot right now, or no?
It's really just the utility pole, which you can see in the existing island as you come off Terminal Road and turn into the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
There's some lighting on the utility poles coming down Terminal Road. And then no other lighting except for, is there lighting with the flagpole today? But there's no light poles
Okay.
around this.
So you're not
portion,
proposing any new light poles or light
Correct.
fixtures in the parking lot? Okay.
Just the sconces on the building.
Okay.
Yep, and the uplighting for the flagpole.
I know that parking's been an issue for the lacrosse facility that's there. Are they parking in this lot?
No. When we designed the building, the lacrosse facility was intended to have their own parking in the front of the facility, not taking up parking spaces for the other tenants back in this area.
So how do you prevent them from parking back there?
Well, it's difficult to do, but we just have to manage that through signage. A lot of the lacrosse facility, though, has events outside of the hours that most tenants are working in the airport itself, so there ends up freeing actually quite a lot of spaces in the back. So we haven't had any problems and a conflict when they've had lacrosse games there.
But that brings us back to the fact that there's very little lighting in this parking lot, and there could be kids and others walking into this parking lot at night.
It's lit down the road, so there is lighting along Terminal Road that extends all the way down to this area. One of the things we've got to be mindful of, too, is that we want to make sure that the air traffic control tower can see operations on the RAM, and when you have tall light poles, that creates glare, and it then becomes a problem for the air traffic controllers to be able to see the ground control and the FBOs where the aircraft leave. So we deliberately don't have any tall light poles that might restrict that.
You can see there's the parking, the island that's in Terminal Road, just as you come off Terminal Road there. There's utility pole there, and it's that run of utility poles that has some of the lighting on those.
Yeah, that's the last light pole that's highlighted there
Right.
now. And that has a light on it.
And then the building sconces and the flagpole uplighting will be the last,
Yeah.
will be what the lighting is limited to.
Could you remind us when the hours of operation of the airport?
So the airport itself, the operational hours for the air traffic control tower is, I believe, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. The administration building is typically only, at the moment, it's only 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. When we have the restaurant tour and the tenant in there, we'll have to discuss with him what his hours are. He may go as late as 10 p.m. if he's serving food for dinner service.
You already have a tenant?
We have a prospective tenant. We did an RFP to find a restaurateur, and we're in the process of negotiating a lease.
Okay.
When you say tenant, are you referring to the restaurateur, or is there both a restaurant and a different tenant?
Oh, there's two tenants. One will be the restaurateur, and currently one of our tenants is Angel Flight Northeast. And we will, once the building is getting near completion, we will do another RFP for the next tenant for the office space. But Angel Flight Northeast, while the construction is going on, is going to move to Eagle East Aviation, some space over in the lower left of the plan here, and they would hope to move back into the new building as well.
So, which is actually my general question. If you tear the building down, that explains where one of the people who's currently in the building goes. But where do you move the admin?
They're actually going to go into Eagle East Aviation as well and rent some space there while the work is going on.
So if the restaurant's ends up being open late, then safety in the parking lot would be even more of an issue.
Yeah, that's not confirmed yet, right?
It's not confirmed yet, and we'll work with the restaurateur and determine what their hours of operation are, and that'll all be part of the negotiation of the lease. And if they need additional lighting, we can discuss that with them as part of their fit out and whether we do need additional lighting at night.
You know, kind of a similar vein, a slightly different concern, more about if it is going to be operating
as a restaurant beyond just the uses of the airport itself, about what that circulation looks like and what that ingress egress looks like to the road that's already challenged by HDR. Now, that's not your problem, but it is a locational problem in terms of how we articulate the traffic to accommodate yet another use in that particular
Yeah,
area.
the use is not changing. We have had a restaurant there for many years. The restaurateur moved out several months ago, and we were not able to secure a new restaurant until the construction happens because of the short duration. But the uses itself is not going to change from what it was.
But that restaurant was only open for breakfast and lunch.
Correct, yes.
The peak
So it
hours,
didn't
if you-
overlap.
Right. If you were to look at the trip generation, the peak hours wouldn't be too different, I guess I would say, based on the hours. If you're looking at the peak, it's the peak for a restaurant use without limitation on hours.
Was going to
That
overlap
gets
with
back
the
to
lunch.
that.
If it's a dinner restaurant, then the peak hours change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But practically speaking, I'm shocked if you have a restaurant that serves dinner there. I mean, it's just, it's going to be a breakfast and lunch place.
There's
It may
a
be,
lot of
and
people going
that's,
there.
that's going to be part of the restaurateur's trial. I think initially they are planning to do breakfast and lunch as they did. But as I said, it's still a negotiation, and he's got some ideas that obviously we'd like to see more. It's better I think it's better for the airport if we have more traffic. Obviously, it's going to be better for the restaurateur if they can be a more viable business than just a breakfast and lunch. So we would hopeful that they could have dinner.
And that would offset the peak from the rest of the facility and the parking spaces there, which is not the dinner peak hour. Okay, we can continue on. So this is a view of the drainage improvements. One thing I wanted to highlight here, which is just a little bit unique, is you can see the blue arrows, and kind of that's just showing that most of the runoff from the property here from Sutton Street down is really flowing toward the airside portion of the facility. So making it a challenge to really be able to capture all of your runoff on your site and do something with it before it discharges, because you are at the discharge point at our site. So we had to get a little creative, and that means we're intercepting runoff that's coming onto the project area from offsite, which is adding quite a bit of flows through the project area. So that's what the stormwater basin you can see there is intended for. That will help mitigate the peak flows through the site. And then the two parking lot islands will have small vegetated detention areas in them. Runoff will enter those through the pre-treatment structures you can see on the bottom left in the image, just kind of a sample image of those. And then further improvements include deep sump catch basins, for which today it's pretty outdated, all kind of older units without any deep sumps, so not getting that TSS removal. So incorporating new deep sump catch basins, as well as a manufactured filtration unit that will remove TSS and total phosphorus before discharging everything in the current location, which is that downstream catch basin in the rectangle on the close to the air side there.
Does any of the discharge enter the watershed?
Enter the watershed, the protected watershed.
The lake watershed?
No, it doesn't. This is just outside of that, and actually
Yes.
all goes to the other direction.
So I know it's outside that,
Mm-hmm.
but my specific question is, although this is outside, does it flow into the watershed?
It does not, and that was
Okay.
my intent with the arrows, to show that it's all kind of going towards the air side, which is in the opposite direction.
Thank you.
Yep.
And does the site, I guess maybe just not related to just this, but it could be, is there any underground fuel tanks on the site? And are you proposing any new underground fuel tanks?
Not within this area, no.
Okay.
Are there fuel tanks in,
We think we were doing a hazardous materials survey, in fact, yesterday, and we think there may be an underground fuel tank associated with the mechanical boiler room. There could be a 1,000-gallon tank in the existing building in the lower left-hand corner. And we don't know. I tried to call the fire department today to see if they had any records of removing that. And but I wasn't able to get a hold of somebody, but I'll be doing that this week. It would be removed as part of the project if there is one there. So.
Okay.
But not jet fuel.
There's no underground jet fuel whatsoever in the airport. All are above ground tanks.
And maybe just to follow on that question with respect to the jet fuel, I mean, if nothing's underground, then I'm assuming that there's tankers and that, or trucks that bring in Jet A, then I guess, do they go through this site?
They currently go through the gate that's up in the top right-hand corner, but we'll have an alternate gate further down Sutton Street that they'll be using while the construction's going on.
Okay.
And before you leave this slide, I may have missed it, but the stormwater basin, the kind of chunk down there, what's it currently being used for, that spot?
Yeah, it's grass that doesn't have a lot of grass. It's kind of gravel and a lawn area.
And do people from a sports facility park there?
It's outside of their lease area, but I don't know if they.
It's not part of their lease area.
No, it's not.
And it is currently not used for parking.
Their lease area is just outside of this view, kind of just planned south from this view.
I don't, but their lease area doesn't have enough parking, so people are going wherever they can, but they're not parking here as far as we know?
They are currently not parking back here.
Okay,
That's not part of any of their parking.
okay.
Okay, so utility plans, so essentially we are extending or improving or relocating existing utility connections. So the site is currently served from that same utility pole we talked about previously in Terminal Road. That's where power and communications comes from. We will be constructing new duct banks for power and communications, as well as a new transformer you can see on this plan. And power will enter the building from the left side, which it currently does today. On the right side of the building, you can see the gas and the sewer. So there's a grease trap for the future restaurant tenant, and the connection to the existing sewer main that runs through the site in front of the building. And gas service will be extended from the existing gas service within the site. Water services on the left side, you can see two water lines. One is domestic, one is fire protection. And then around to the back of the building where there is an existing hydrant, there will be, that hydrant will be relocated kind of in a similar location in relation to the existing building, just set back off the back of the building corner on the air side of the operations. There's another hydrant, which you can just see almost to the edge of the plan on the right side here, existing in front of the snow removal equipment building, adjacent to that parking lot there. So those are the two hydrants that serve the site.
There's another one further south. It's out of the plan view as well.
Correct, down on Terminal,
Yeah.
closer to Terminal Road, yeah.
Are you going to talk later about snow storage areas?
We can talk about that now if we would like. There are somewhat limited snow storage areas, but I guess, if you want to talk about, Phil, the uses today in snow removal on the site.
Yeah, so
and
typically
close.
when we take care of snow removal on it, most of it gets piled in the area between the proposed administration building and our maintenance building. There's an area just up in that corner that we typically pile it there when we need to remove it as part of the snow.
Do you
if
ever
it-
cart it off?
What's that?
Do you ever cart the snow off?
On occasion, if it's really deep snow, we can. We have a very large loader, and we have lots of equipment and we have lots of area on the airport itself where we can pile snow if we really need to get it off the taxiways, runways, and any other areas. So.
When you say gas service on here, that's natural gas?
That's natural gas, yes.
The gas service is only for the restaurant. It's not for the administration portion of the building. With the energy code, we're required to do all electric for new public buildings. So.
Which is why solar on that big flat roof would be nice, but
The plan for all these administration buildings, this is the fifth one for airports in Massachusetts, and they're all approximately the same design. And they were all designed so that the flat roof is all solar ready for most of them. And we're hoping that by the time this building is nearing completion, if the current administration changes their minds, we'll be back to having solar incentives, which would be really helpful again.
So where could we see another one like is there some already built?
Yes, absolutely. Plymouth, Marshfield, Taunton. And Taunton is a really nice one. It has a pretty vibrant restaurant, too.
Thank you.
This plan is just depicting compliance with the regulations in terms of erosion control. So all catch basins will be protected with silt sacks. Stockpile areas will be protected, again, around them, fully protected around the proposed stormwater basin area, and around the limits of disturbance. There's also a pretty substantial operation and maintenance plan submitted as part of the stormwater management plan with the application. And last two plan slides here, just showing the landscaping, some of the shrubs and grasses that will be within that island, which functions kind of as a landscaping area as well as the stormwater infiltration and kind of detention area. And vehicle turning movements, you can see the North Andover Fire vehicle maneuvering through the site. No conflicts there, and I know they've had previously worked with us and took a look at this plan and the hydrant locations.
And just a question on the landscaping plan. Maybe this might be an obvious question, but I'm assuming that you picked shrubs because of the height of potential trees, right? Is that
Right.
the case?
We're not planting full height trees in the island, just kind of smaller shrubs and grass covers, both for because of the due to the use of the island as a detention area and kind of the moist part of the site.
Okay.
Native species that are tolerant.
Yeah. Is there any FAA guidance on landscaping design around airports? I'm just curious.
There is no FAA guidance on landscaping. In fact, they recommend against landscaping around airports because it attracts wildlife.
Got it.
Gene, I have a question for you in terms of the peer review and the drainage, or how far into that are we?
Pretty close to complete, so they've received the first peer review letter and they've responded to it. We're waiting for the last review of it.
Okay.
I think there wasn't anything that was insurmountable in the last
Okay.
one.
Right, yeah. It was pretty straightforward, and we were able to address them all without much issue. So I expect or hope she'll come back satisfied, but there might be a couple things she finds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
So just kind of stepping through the requested relief, we talked about the off-street parking quantity. We'll go through each of these, but it's the off-street parking, the landscaping requirements, the waiver of traffic impact study, the waiver of physical impact analysis, and the waiver of community impact analysis. So for the parking, using the typical kind of multi-use calculation, we've stuck with the full required parking spaces for the non-fast food, non-drive-through restaurant use. So that's a 39 space count. And then there would be 14 required spaces based on kind of the category, which is office and business, other business or office. There isn't really a perfectly applicable category for this. But based on operations and use and the office, the administration staff and the office tenant that's there. Currently, we were requesting the reduction from 14 to 7. So that brings us to a total of 46 required, and we proposed 46 spaces in that lot.
So go ahead, John.
Do you normally, on parking, sort of go through a process that, okay, you want less parking, and I get it, I think that's a good idea, but you give yourself the flexibility that if it turns out you need more, you can go back up to the required level or higher? I mean, do you have space if we needed to go higher is really my question.
That's a good question. This site specifically has, it has a lot of parking in that one parking area, depending how far you are from the use you're looking at. We're limited to what we're looking to disturb here and in terms of budgetary constraints and available site use to kind of use for this project, right? So we've tried to design the parking to maximize what we can get, right, but also balance what we need for stormwater and open space and all of that. So I would say
the parking on the right-hand side you see there is not counted in this.
That's right.
Because we really just took the disturbed
That's
area
fine.
that we've been
But
working.
it's directly contiguous, right?
It
It
is
is.
all,
And-
yes, it is all.
And what, like today, what would you see on a typical day?
So on a typical day today, without the, and if you want to go back, is there one of the existing spaces at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There you
that's still new.
all the way to the,
Well,
yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get a
But
sense of.
the, so
Yeah, there
there
you
you
go.
can
Yeah.
see. So typical parking spaces today, you can see from that particular photo, there happen to be, 7 or 8 cars on one side, and there's none on the administration building side. Very often, depending on how that's set up, we have probably 60% of those parking spaces filled at any given time. And on the upper right-hand corner, that is probably only about 50% full any time I've ever been there.
Okay. And is
So-
there any peak period that you have,
Not,
or?
not really. The hangar businesses that are on the right side, we have MedFlight, and we have private hangars and a flight school. They generate cars coming and going so much, and but very much there's a transient ramp for arriving aircraft, but we don't have any long-term parking of aircraft users that would leave their car there and go away. So I bet if you went by there tonight, there'd be no cars in that upper right-hand parking lot, and maybe 1 or 2 by the administration building, but it's really, that's about it.
I mean, my whole point it is, if you're asking for a waiver, you've demonstrated you got a lot of flexibility, you got
We
certain
do,
space, all
and
that sort of thing.
because
Yeah.
we were just looking at the area disturbance for construction, we were only really looking at our particular area that you see in that, but we did not include any of the parking spaces that are on the right-hand side. And we have not done the calculation what's required for the uses that are on those sides. So,
Okay.
well, we could go through that exercise, but I imagine the parking on the right-hand side for the uses we currently have is more than ample for those uses.
And I'm sorry, the parking on the right-hand side, is that, those leased spaces as part of?
None of the, no, they're still open parking.
Okay.
So the lease spaces for our tenants, they get their own buildings, and a lot of times if you have an airport user, they can park on within their space further in.
Yep.
So you get a mixed bag of visitors and people who are coming to the airport for those particular hangar space uses. We don't have any assigned parking anywhere on the site, so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, maybe this is where I'm kind of struggling. I guess, given that there's ample parking, I guess why request the waiver, right? It seems like.
I think
just
it's
a-
only because we're looking at the actual
Yeah,
construction
okay.
area
Right.
and not going into the
Got it.
overlapping, because if we had to do the calculation for the entire airport, we probably have more than enough space for parking.
Mhm.
But we're only looking at our particular portion of it.
Okay.
Okay, landscaping modification. So requirements are 1 tree per 30 linear feet of the perimeter of the parking, and then the 6-foot landscaped open space between parking rows, which I would say we are probably essentially meeting the intent of the landscaped open space within the parking rows, the 2 parking rows we have with the vegetated detention areas. But we are not planting trees that would equate to the amount that would be required for the perimeter of the parking space. So that's the reason for the request.
We, just to kind of go back into it, we don't like planting trees, not because we don't like trees, but because it brings nesting birds. Not good for aircraft.
And then the traffic impact study waiver, based on the uses and the very marginally different size of the footprint of the building and for each use, a traffic study in terms of trip generation would really provide no new measurable change in the trip generation numbers. And again, I believe anything that could be offset based on restaurant hours is really made up by the difference in the office uses and the ample parking in that main parking area. That would likely be sufficient for that. Fiscal impact and community impact analysis waiver, essentially based on the fact that this is a public service providing a public use and contributing to the economy and employment and the transportation infrastructure and the care that the airport operation kind of provides, as well as the location of this project specifically within the overall 400-plus acre campus. It doesn't feel like there would be a lot of value provided by those as far as community impact and fiscal impact. I think we need to go through all of these, but we feel that the project kind of meets the requirements of the general welfare findings as well as the site plan review criteria and the special permit criteria. We can go through any of these that you might like, but essentially really no neighborhood impact, no significant traffic changes, and in harmony with the purpose and intent of the bylaw, as well as kind of the appropriate location for the use given its location at the airport, and the fact that all the uses are really there today with the existing facility, which is just in need of repair.
Do you have
feel it would
any
meet the
increased
criteria.
potable water use need?
Other than the restaurant,
But I mean increase from what we had before.
I think that really depends on the amount of patrons the restaurant can get.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
I think in general, though, the administration portion of it, the water is going to be much less usage in that than currently because the current fixtures, none of them meet any standards for water. And I imagine if you go into the restaurant, you probably see all the faucets dripping. It's in dire need of a replacement.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good.
very
Well
much.
done. It was a nice package you put together.
Thank you so much. I
Yep.
appreciate that.
Any other?
What's the timeline?
We're hoping to have the construction, well, we'll know for certain on our financing by the first week of September, we hope. We're going to try to put the project out to bid in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and with bids due the first week of September, and then hopefully that will take less than a month to issue a contract, and it'll take about 18 months to construct the building.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment? Anything over email?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. So Jean, what's next steps?
So I anticipate stormwater review will be done this week. I have to follow up with departments because I don't think I've gotten department review comments from the fire department. Just let me check that real quick. Yeah, just conservation and police department had no concerns, but I'd like to get the fire department to at least opine on the turning radius of the fire truck. And I most likely be positioned to draft a decision for the next meeting.
Okay.
2 words from one.
Super. So I guess, any other questions?
I guess I would ask, I mean, a lot of conversation about the restaurant and maybe additional hours than what we've experienced in the past. So I would suggest maybe a condition that once a tenant is selected, to maybe come back in and talk about that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Just
That's
Just a discussion, just explaining hours of operation and
Yep.
lighting, whether we need a photometric plan or not. I
Mhm.
mean, I've been down there, I've never seen a lighting issue, but it's
Good idea.
valid concern.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Gene, if I can just add, because we did come before the planning board group back in March or April, to present it to the TRC.
Yep.
And we got some really good feedback, and we did get a list of recommendations for the restaurateur, and specifically to make sure that if there's any anticipation of serving alcohol, to make sure that they're having conversations. If there's any anticipation about storage of materials, particularly flammable materials, we did get some good feedback based on that, and just we went through some conversations about the dumpster and the expectation of how the restaurateur will work. So I do think there will definitely be lots of outreach to both to this group and to your other colleagues, because I think, and that will be obviously with a different group, but Phil's the person who can pass that message along.
I'll be involved in the project until it's completed, and as the owner's project manager for the airport, we work with the tenants, and when they do their fit-out process, we were in front of the select board last night, and as we negotiate our lease, we told the restaurateur that he's going to have to come in and get his approval for a liquor license if he wants that, and we'll have to work with the Board of Health, but we want to make sure that this is a good fit for the community. And there's always been a restaurant there for a long time, and even after the restaurant closed, several months ago, I'd be in there working, and people will walk in and go, "Where's the restaurant?" So it's really missed by the community, and we're looking forward to a new building. I'm happy to take you around and show you probably one of the most antiquated transformers that I've seen in my 40 years of construction, and the electric room is quite shocking. So it's in much needed repair. As I said, this is, I think, building number 5 or 6 of the statewide airport administration buildings, and it's probably in one of the worst shape of the existing building is one of the worst shape of many of them that got approval before us. So we appreciate the support from the town of North Andover, and we want to be a good neighbor. So
Great. Well, thank you. So we'll continue this to our next meeting.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Regards to Francisco.
Hopefully he's not camping in the rain.
All right, moving to discussion items, 894 Great Pond Road, Tom Childs on behalf of Patricia and Michael Savdis? Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
So this was on the agenda for a request for a waiver to extend a paved driveway into the non-disturbance buffer zone. So the existing driveway is in non-disturbance, and they just wanted to do another leg off of that driveway. I sent it to peer review through John Borghese, the town engineer. He suggested a test pit be done in that area, just given the depth of the design for the rain garden. And the homeowner has decided he doesn't need that extension to the degree he thought he did, and so he's just opted to not construct it and withdraw the request for the waiver.
Okay.
And that doesn't need to be motioned or anything, it was just a
Yeah,
discussion item.
discussion item. Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, so moving on to the next discussion item, so potential permitting uses zoning bylaw amendment.
All right, so I believe I've mentioned in the past that there's a number of discrepancies have been identified between the bylaw text and the Table 1 summary of use requirements. So over the years, we've done bylaw amendments that updates text but didn't necessarily update the corresponding use on the table. And it appears vice versa has happened over the years, where the table has been updated and it doesn't coincide with what the bylaw text says. And so this is one of Samantha's first really big projects, because I've had other staff planners honestly try it to try to reconcile all these conflicts, not just in yes and no on the table, but bylaw definition conflicts, terminology conflicts. It's really, really big. Samantha understands it. What we talked about is our table of use is just alphabetical. So we've decided to categorize uses. So there's all kinds of residential uses, including continuing care retirement and assisted livings, in addition to single 1, 2, multifamily. And so Samantha has broken all the uses into categories. And tonight we wanted to just tease you with the residential uses only. We thought this would be the easiest. And then just get a little direction. Do you want us to continue down this path and just try to clean this up once and for all? Because honestly, I'll give you a hard example. So a veterinary or kennel use. The bylaw text, I-2, is the only place that allows kennel use. And some of you may have been on the board. One was planned at the Osgood Landing facility in an outbuilding, and they soon moved across the street. So they're like the last building on the right before you get to Haverhill now. that's all I-2. And, I'm sorry, that's CDD3 across the road. And so initially, no, you can't go until a building commissioner realized the table actually says yes for CDD3. The text itself didn't say yes for CDD3, and that's why we always thought it was only I-2. So they did move across the street. And so there's just example after example of that type of.
Don't you have to go back to when all the changes were made to see which thing takes precedence? Because if you're out of sync, which is right,
We could, or we could do another bylaw amendment to whatever you guys agree to today.
it's probably easier to do it
Easier
that way.
path. Yes, and even if they were out of sync by mistake, we would still have to do an amendment to fix it
Yeah.
at this point, because we recodified the bylaw back a few years ago.
Yeah.
Probably 17 or 18, we recodified the whole thing.
Yeah.
So whatever's there today is
Yeah,
what's there.
there's also some uses, obviously, we probably even don't have today that we should probably put in the,
Exactly.
in the bylaws.
Yep,
Yeah.
and so we have a handful of those, like brewery, distillery, like why don't we allow that in the downtown, in the mill area?
Yep.
And maybe some other areas. So we first thought we'd start with, let's see what we have, and then we were gonna just layer in some proposed new uses as well,
Cool.
so.
All right,
All
Samantha,
right,
take us
Samantha,
away.
you're up. And like I said, there's a lot of information that's gonna be conveyed, and if you just take it in, no decisions have to be made tonight. We just want to, like, kind of set the table of what we're up against.
Thank you, Jean. Just to reintroduce myself to those of you I haven't had the chance to meet yet, I'm Samantha Carr. I'm the staff planner with the town. Nice to meet you all, and looking forward to going through the residential uses portion of the table with you this evening. So, as Jean mentioned, we're diverting from that alphabetical format that's the current base state of the table. We're looking at proposing this on a category basis, so we'll be starting with a review of the residential uses this evening. Subsequently, we're hoping to chat through commercial, industrial uses, public facing, so things like agriculture, as well as education uses, et cetera. So this will just be a small chunk of the table that we're hoping to kind of take this piece by piece and have a collective conversation with folks. So just talking through the content of the presentation, I've included a snapshot of the portion of the table we'll be discussing. So there's two table snapshots. One is the base zoning districts and one is the overlay zoning districts, followed by some slides to review with folks. So one is regarding decision points. Whereas Jean was mentioning, there's a disparity between the text regulations and the summary table of uses. Often the case will be that there's a no in the table of uses, but a yes in the text, so how does that discrepancy get addressed? Secondly, there's language discrepancies where there's variance between the official verbiage in the text versus the table. So we've taken the table simply because it's an abbreviated and standardized version of that use to be the official language that we'd like to bring forward. So when there's discrepancy between that and the text versus the table, we're highlighting those to you. Thirdly, permitted use recommendations. So there's some areas of the table that are currently blank. So we have those in highlight as recommended, so we can flesh that out, and there's not a gray area for folks to figure out whether that blank means a no or if there's some mobility to contend with that with the planning board. And then finally, the glossary definitions portion. For residential uses, the majority of the terms that we're bringing forward for folks today currently exist in other sections of the bylaw. We're proposing to have them added to the general glossary, so there's a bit of more ease of readability for folks, that they don't necessarily have to be looking through the 20 articles to find whether that term exists and what that encompasses. We're also looking at a couple areas where we can discuss additions or addendums to the glossary definitions, and then rectifying if there's disparate definitions used for a particular term, so there's clarity for folks.
Samantha, if there's any way you can talk a little bit louder, it would be helpful.
Sure. Is that a little bit better?
The microphone does help, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So just, maybe it just needs to be closer to your,
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Feel free to
That's
let me know if you're having trouble hearing. Okay, great. So just a quick snapshot of the two zoning tables we'll be discussing here. We had to break them out into two different documents just due to the length of the table with the districts. So this is the base zoning district table. And I have included those as an attachment in the folder as well if folks are interested in seeing the full table. But just to quickly run through what we're seeing in terms of the symbology. So anything that's redlined is changes to the existing table. If we're seeing letters that have been struck through, for example, that were listed as an N that are put as a Y, that means the use was permitted by right in the text. So we're trying to rectify those two cases. Highlighted letters are recommendations where the table was previously blank, so we can try to bring conformity. Asterisk refers to when we're asking the applicant to go back to the text to look at further details for that particular use. And then the blue columns are columns that have been, or the blue rows, I should say, have been added to the table. So you'll see here that's the family suite and assisted living facility. And in the PDF attachments, this is the marked up version of the document, but you'll see in the static PDF there's green and blue rows. That's just a distinction for folks to know that the green are the net new uses, so things like the brewery that we've been discussing. The blue are terms that were already permitted uses in the text, but they may not have had a row specifically in the table. So we just wanted to provide that distinction for folks to see we're not trying to add a huge amount of new terminology, but we're trying to create uniformity between the table and the text provisions.
So, related to the categories, are they all defined in a separate section? Like, where are the definitions of each of those?
For the categories themselves?
Yeah, like where you define what's a guest house, what's a townhouse. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So for each of, the items in bold, so residential housing and group housing, those are just aggregate categories we're using to house the residential uses, but everything that's not in bold is an existing permitted use. And so we've gone through and looked at, does the glossary currently have a definition to articulate exactly what that encompasses? For the vast majority of the terms, there is a glossary definition in place. If there's not, we will be addressing that at the end of this presentation.
So John, Article 2 has all the definitions in the bylaw, so Article 2 is the definitions. An example of one that doesn't exist is assisted living facility. So you're going to see in Samantha's presentation, we're going to propose a definition for an assisted living facility. But that's a use that does not have a definition.
Yeah.
And then in the appropriate section, the setbacks requirements, but everything in that area, continuing care, retirement, et cetera, is a separate section for that.
Yep.
Yeah, as it
That will
exists
continue.
today. You wouldn't change any
No.
of that.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
So just a quick question on the family suite piece. So, I mean, I think aren't we sunsetting that?
We are.
So I guess maybe just a question why, I guess, should we leave that in or should we take it out? Given that
It's
gonna be-
sunsetting in July 1st of '28.
Okay,
And so we have a town meeting ahead of it. It just,
got it.
we just included it because it's cleaning up the table today. And
Got it.
by the time we get to town meeting, it might not be this May, to be honest. And if it's the following May, then maybe we decide to take it out.
Just, okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy to flash back to this slide for folks if it's helpful, but we're hoping to try to kind of go line by line through items. And then this is just a snapshot of the overlay zoning districts. So the current table has the Osgood Smart Growth Overlay districts included. We've also included here the Downtown Overlay District as well as Sub-District A with the Historic Mills area and the MBTA Multifamily Overlay District as a point of reference for folks.
So that's another example. We put in a whole bylaw for MBTA multifamily housing, but we never updated the table. We never added that overlay district.
So, I may be going off track, but is there any reason to keep the Osgood Smart District given what has happened?
It hasn't been repealed technically. So the town voted to repeal it and the state did not allow it.
Oh, okay.
There was a clawback provision.
That's right, there some money
Yeah.
attached to it somehow, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
No historic barn overlay district?
I didn't include the historic barn overlay, but if you'd like to. We also went back and forth on the watershed protection district, but I don't think that makes any sense to include here. It's not about uses, it's about
Okay.
distances, but good point, Peter. We've not received one application other than one particular barn with a boat.
So I guess jumping into the decision points section here. So looking at the table, for example, in the first row you're seeing here for the zoning districts, residential 1 to residential 3, the use of independent elderly housing. So currently in the bylaw text, independent elderly housing is permitted by special permit, specifically in the residential 3 district. In the current table of use regulations, it's permitted by right across residential 1 to residential 3 parcels. So in this case, we were recommending adding the use by right to the bylaw text to bring the text into conformity with the table. So that's just one example of how we can go kind of line by line through this table. There's a couple of other terms to consider for folks. So for example, 2-family in the R5 district is currently permitted by right in the table. There's no mention of it in the text, so there's some gray area there to discern. I would say in general, the recommendations are leaning towards the more permissive case, was what we've been proposing here. So if the use is allowed by right in either case, we're trying to bring that into conformity. In addition, we'll see in the Osgood overlay some discrepancies related to congregate housing in the residential mixed-use zone as well as the mixed-use zone. Currently, the table allows those by right. They're not mentioned in the text. Continuing care retirement centers as well are mentioned by right in the Osgood mixed-use zone. They are mentioned by special permit in the text, so that's an active discussion point for folks. I'm open to receiving folks' feedback about direction on that piece. And then finally, the independent elderly housing in the Osgood mixed-use zone as well is in a similar circumstance allowed by right in the table and by special permit in the text. So there's a decision point to be made there to rectify those uses, and specifically in the cases where there's no mention in the text, trying to bring some discernment whether we'd like to stick with the table of use regulations as the base decision point for that use.
Right. So I might be confusing myself, but the table of use is intended to be a summary and not the guiding document. The text is intended to be the guiding document. And so for the last two, the table says yes, but the text says by special permit. So we'd want to match it to the text, right, and update the table to say special permit?
Yeah, I mean, at one level, it's moot because nothing's going to happen ever in Osgood, but continuing care retirement centers in particular are very large projects, and you would never want to have one that isn't subject to a special permit. I mean,
Right.
I just don't think that's a good idea.
That you would want them subject to a special permit?
You want to
The
subject
use,
to a
yes.
special
Yeah.
permit.
Yeah, so I think
yeah.
maybe
So a couple, but
that I
I
might have
think I'd go through
miscommunicated, but
all
we
of
want to
them and
default
look,
to the
yeah.
bylaw text
Okay.
when they're not in sync with each other.
Yeah, I mean, even like the first one, independent elderly housing, I gotta refresh myself with the definition of that, but there's a reason, you know, R3 is getting in smaller lot size, and you may wanna decide, you know, you may wanna go with that proposed change, or you may not. I'd have to look at the definition first, because I just forget what
I
it is.
forget it, and I don't know why it's only in R3, to be honest. There must have been a proposal at one time for one of these facilities that didn't come through.
I mean, I think the history of it is that each time somebody proposed some version of multifamily housing for elders, they were all different, and you couldn't fit it under the same definition. Like the continuing care retirement was the first one, because
Yeah.
that's what Edgewood basically was. But that was for a large project. Then we started to see some smaller ones being proposed, and we realized we didn't have zoning for them. So I
Yeah.
think we layered like 3 different kinds in there. But it's been so long, and I don't think like any of them ever got built, to tell you the truth, in
So-
some of those.
Brightview on 114 was permitted as a continuing care retirement center, because they have an age-in-place component
Yeah.
within one building. So
Yeah.
much different scale than Edgewood, but those are the only two that I know of that were permitted through continuing care. So,
Yeah, I mean, one time where the, oh gosh, what's the name of the street? Cobblestone Crossing, you know, that was an old historical house, and there was like 15 acres behind it, and originally, I think that's how we ended up with the congregate housing bylaw
so
because of
maybe.
that. Because that's what they first were going to propose for that site, but they ended up building single-family
Subdivision.
houses, so.
Yeah. Okay.
And I did just want to touch quickly to Jean and to folks for cases where the bylaw text makes no mention of the use. I think, is there some mobility for folks to discern if the table's providing direction on that piece?
Is there an example of that here?
So, for example, in the R5 district, there's no mention of two-family being a use in the text, but the
Okay.
table does mention it being permitted by right.
I think the tricky thing there is you got to look at, like in R5, you got to look at it in the context of the minimum lot size and the other uses to see if it all fits together. I mean, I just off the top of my head, in R5, you're going to build, what is it, like 10 per acre, is it? I forget what it is, but it's a larger number. And then the question becomes, if you do two-family, what's the minimum lot size? Because you're dealing with a different kind of use, and you have to really think about how you want to organize it, whether it makes sense to do it or not. And, you know, I can't give you the answer off the top of my head. I'd want to think about it first.
So we'll look at that in context.
Yeah.
with- I know what you're referring to. There's all kind of footnotes in R5,
Yeah,
depending
in
on
R5,
what you're
and
about
it was,
building.
I mean, I think R5 was basically Royal Crest. I think that was why R5 was done originally.
Yeah, there are other.
And there were a few others, yeah, but all they meet that, and it's actually, the interesting thing is the density is relatively small, certainly compared to the Royal Crest redevelopment. It was, you know, the density was far less than what's being
Oh, much
proposed
less,
now,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So looking at the language discrepancies piece. So you can see here broken down the zoning district, the use, and then we're currently looking at the permitted use as described in the table versus in the bylaw text. So for example, this first use for rooming houses in the zoning districts, residential 4, residential 5, and residential 6, as well as village residential. The bylaw text refers to rooming houses as renting rooms for dwelling purposes and also groups it with guest house or rooming house. So in this instance, the recommendation is to change the bylaw text to refer to them as rooming houses to bring that into conformity with the table as a defined term and separate out guest house as a separate line item as it's referred to in the summary table of uses as a separate distinct permitted use,
And define it.
as well as a defined term. So these are kind of somewhat minor clerical edits to the text, but we wanted to bring these to folks' attention while we're kind of getting in the weeds of going through, bringing everything into conformity. So if there was any confusion in the text of whether that's an equation of the use in the table, that there wouldn't be, you know, questions about that going forward in the future with applicants. So the other terms here we're looking at in R4 around multifamily. So kind of larger verbiage in the text referring to it as conversion of an existing dwelling to accommodate not more than 5 residential units. So largely we were recommending preserving that, but just adding the word multifamily housing within that. So it's a little bit easier for folks to discern that's what it's referring to. If they were to go to the glossary section, multifamily is 3+ units, so they can kind of work backwards from there, but make it a little easier from a readability perspective. Similarly, there is a use called out for 3-family structures in the Osgood residential mixed use and mixed use zones. There's currently not a permitted use in the table of uses for 3-family. There's 1-family, 2-family, townhouse, and then multifamily. So we were proposing to remove the 2 references here to 3-family and have that be encompassed in the multifamily housing permitted use. And then lastly, similarly, kind of a clerical edit for the residential 6 and village residential zones for 1-family dwelling units. They're referred to as single-family residential structures. So just bringing that into conformance to change the bylaw text to a 1-family dwelling to bring it into conformity as a defined term. And that will just make it a little bit easier for folks to navigate between the text, the summary table, and if they are interested in looking at the glossary to find the defined term.
Good.
So Samantha, the guest house or rooming house, in the base zoning districts on the very first slide that we saw, only has guest house, it doesn't have rooming house on it. Is rooming house supposed to, I don't know, and I don't think we have the definitions, I'm not sure, but, I mean, I'm sure we have it somewhere.
Sure.
Or we
sure.
have one of the definitions, not the other, because we're adding that.
Right. So for guest house, it's the third item under residential housing, and then
Yep.
rooming house is the last one listed under group housing.
Okay.
So those have just been separated out based on their use classification, where the guest house was more equivalated with like a single-family home structure, whereas a rooming house was intended as more of a group housing facility. So just for classification purposes, those were bifurcated in the table into residential versus group housing. There is currently a rooming house definition as well as a guest house definition in the glossary, and they're separate, distinct terms. So it was perhaps a bit confusing that they're referred to like jointly in the text.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. And those aren't confused with temporary housing, like Airbnb type situations.
So the guest house use is, it can be intended as like a vacation occupancy. I'm not sure if there's a distinction locally between that and a short-term rental, but there is a mention of that in the glossary definition. So we can take a look into that further to discern that.
And that might, I mean, there are going to be situations where we just want to update because of current times and current practices, right, and uses. So when we're reconciling the table with the bylaw, we want to make sure we're taking into account things we're seeing right now, right?
Okay.
Right? No,
Sure.
and that's, I was just thinking
I
about that.
missed that conversation, but I heard Airbnb, so if you're
Short-term housing,
suggesting
yeah.
we create a bylaw for Airbnb?
No, I'm not. I'm just
Okay.
asking if it was taken into account in any of those. Because guest house sounds like, sounded to me like, without knowing the definition, sounded like something more short-term. But it apparently is not. It's a long-term use of a dwelling.
I would need to check if there's an occupancy requirement linked to the glossary definition. I do think it can be used for like a vacation purpose, so I'm not sure if it goes beyond that to be something of a more permanent residential structure for folks. So I think we could dig into that a bit further to get some more information for you.
Okay, thank you.
So my thought and approach for this particular article would be a housekeeping article, not introducing
New things.
these wild
Yeah,
things.
yeah, I
And
agree.
even if we do settle on, yes, we want workers' space or distillery or, like I said, we've come up with 5 or so new uses that we think should be entertained. I would even propose that as a separate warrant
Yeah.
article,
Yeah.
not complete the two.
No, I agree. I agree. And because at the end of the day, I think we're just making sure we harmonize essentially the table to the actual definition, right?
I
as
know it probably
housekeeping.
doesn't seem that, but we picked residential because we thought this was the easier one.
Yeah, sure,
Given
sure.
the categories we have begun to look at, and so we just wanted to like start here, and then my preference for digesting it, the easiest way for me is to actually take a bylaw and redline it and like actually have the warrant article. That's how I've always operated. As you guys know, I present you the warrant article and redline. I think we'll take whatever feedback we have here, but for residential, we move to a redline version so that you can
Yep.
digest it a little better, but we're just giving you kind of the background of how we came to this. I didn't mean to-
And the tables are part of the bylaw, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
those would similarly just be attached to that
Yep.
warrant.
Yes, exactly. Great. Just flashing to the next slide here, just covering the last bit of language discrepancies. So one thing we were talking over was continuing care retirement center, reference of multiple discrete uses for the facilities. So one thing that we saw in a couple of the zoning districts was the mention of assisted living units as a discrete term. So we're seeing this in the Osgood residential mixed use zone, the general mixed zone, as well as the MBTA overlay. In addition, in the downtown overlay historic mills sub-district, as well as in that aggregate term in the historic mills district as well. So in talking through this, what we were seeing was kind of a mashup of those terms together in the bylaw text, and generally speaking, the recommended action here was to change to 3 discrete uses in the text. Currently, there's no glossary definition for assisted living units, and it was not a discrete row in the summary table of uses. So we are proposing to add assisted living facility to the table of use, along with an accompanying definition, and just parsing those out as separate line items in the bylaw text to make it a bit easier for folks to read, and make sure it's clear that it's not just the aggregate term of a continuing care retirement center that's being permitted in a particular district, which could be a potential interpretation if they're seeing kind of the aggregate bundle of those terms that fall under the umbrella term of a continuing care retirement center.
Yeah, I don't want to boil the ocean here, but there's a minimum lot size for our continuing care retirement center, and I don't think you possibly could put one in the downtown overlay district. There's not enough land. And so we may want to see, as part of this exercise, again, if there's logical impossibilities in the way we roll it out. It's not a big deal, and you may not even want to do it because it may deal with those changes of uses.
Yeah.
But, ultimately, some of the stuff doesn't make sense.
And I will say for the bottom 2 rows of this table, the continuing care retirement center is kind of used as a bucket term, as a proxy use. If we go back to the overlay table here for the downtown overlay, that it's not currently recommended to permit continuing care retirement centers, but what this table is showing is essentially if someone were to go and see assisted living, that's not currently a permitted use. So the only other area of the bylaw where assisted living facility.
Then we may want to revisit it because it's been a number of years. But I remember when we originally created those multifamily senior uses, we were very careful. This was meant for these districts. Like, I think CCRC was only intended for R1 and R2. That was it. No other place. So we may just want to go back and see if we still land in the same place.
R1, R2, and village residential.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe you think uses like assisted living, congregate care, and some of these other categories were all one warrant article at one time? Because we can look back.
They were
directly at
over a
that.
couple of years. I think the first one was the CCRC, and then I think the other ones followed a year or 2 later.
Okay.
So they were probably, I'm going to guess, in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, 87, I think, was
Yeah.
Edgewood. So we'll look
Yeah.
for that. See if we can find any more context around them, because
Yeah.
it's definitely not consistent in the bylaw.
Thank you. And then just flashing forwards here, and happy to go back and forth if folks have questions, but just to show you the breadth of content. So for the permitted use recommendations, I apologize, this text is a bit small to read, but what we were trying to show here is each line item, what the rationale was behind the highlight. So I can just talk through these with folks, but this is for the overlay table. So first off, looking at accessory dwelling units, there was 2 items that were blank, the downtown overlay base district, as well as the MBTA multifamily. Their recommendation is to list these as no. This is in line with the recent accessory dwelling unit bylaw updates that are prohibiting single-family homes in the Osgood Smart Growth Overlay Zone. And so we're extending this provision to downtown overlay and MBTA multifamily. The second item for family suites is also listed, recommended to be listed as no. This is kind of building off our conversation we were having earlier, that this is a term that's planned to be sunsetted in July 1st of 2028, so we're not intending to extend this beyond its current reach in the districts, and really just trying to bring the table into conformity with the text in case a use case does come up in the next 2-year period, or if this goes to town meeting next year and the year before the term sunset. The guest house use is also proposed to be listed as no, with the rationale that guest house have primarily been associated with single-family structures, and given that the context of these overlay districts, we're talking about downtown heavy mixed-use, high-density residential commercial mix of uses, that this might not be a compatible use. We'd like to see spreading into those zones, so it's recommended as a no. One family dwelling recommended to be listed as a no, similar to accessory dwelling unit, in line with the recent accessory dwelling unit bylaw updates that have prohibited single family and the Osgood Smart Growth. So taking an intuitive nod from that to extend to MBTA, given it's a convergent zone, as well as the downtown overlay. A two-family, similar rationale to be recommended as a no in these areas. We're trying to encourage a higher density of residential uses in the downtown and MBTA areas, as well as townhouses. They are permitted as a yes in the Historic Mills area and the MBTA, and there's no highlight there because the text currently does have existing provisions for townhouses in those two zones.
Isn't it more like for one family in the overlay districts, it's more like it's an NA as opposed to a no, because the underlying zoning district does allow, it's probably mostly, a lot of it's R4, right? So you're allowed to put a single-family house in the underlying district. The overlay, it's kind of the whole intent of it was to add more density. So, I mean, you know, that's maybe the way you do it, but practically speaking, it's an NA as opposed to a no.
So you can either come in with a filing under the underlying or the overlay.
Or the
So if you come in
overlay.
under the overlay, you can't come in with a
That's
single-family
fair.
home.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's the
Okay.
intent.
Yeah.
And then the multifamily dwelling here is just in line with the text provision, so it's a yes across all of the districts. Those asterisks is just referred folks to the text to see when there's a use case that requires a special permit. And I'll flash through the second set of recommendations here. This is for the base table. So starting for the group housing portion of the table with assisted living facilities, this has been added as a new line item to the table. You'll see that in a couple of the zoning districts, there's already provisions for a standalone assisted living facility in the residential mixed-use zone, the Historic Mills subdistrict, as well as the MBTA multifamily. In the mixed-use zone, business overlay zone, and then the general downtown overlay, that was left blank in the table. So what's been recommended here is listing as special permit in the mixed-use zone and no in the business overlay and downtown overlay, with the rationale that this would be in conformity with the current extent that nursing and convalescent homes are permitted in the table. So trying to provide a similar like-by-like use in the table. And then for congregate housing, there's just one district that didn't have existing provisions. That was the downtown overlay. So that's been recommended to be listed as a no, with the rationale that this mirrors the uses permitted in the Osgood business overlay zone, which have similar purposes in terms of what those areas are trying to foster in terms of a mix of uses. For the continuing care retirement center, both are listed as a no. Primarily, John, as you were speaking to, that CCRC has distinct special legal considerations for placement. We're recommending kind of preserving the existing extent of uses and not extending that to other zones throughout the code. For independent elderly housing in the downtown overlay, listed as a no, as well as nursing and convalescent homes listed as a no. Similar rationale to the congregate housing to mirror the uses allowed in the business overlay zone, similar to the downtown overlay zone in terms of the purpose of what those districts are trying to facilitate in terms of a mix of uses and utilization of parcels. And then the last one here is the rooming houses. So downtown overlay general area has been recommended to be listed as no. The historic mills subdistrict is recommended as a yes, and MBTA multifamily as a no. Essentially looking at the broader table, if we zoom out, rooming houses have traditionally been allowed in zones that are single-family home zoned as well. So given that the historic mills has that classification, that was the kind of determination structure here. So I know that these two slides are quite hard to read, so happy to, I know Jean's attached this as an attachment to the planning board agenda, so folks are welcome to have that, and happy to circulate a hard copy if helpful to take a look over. But these are blank areas of the table, and so there's no direction from either the table or the text for how we'd like to fill in the blanks, so to speak. So this is a first pass at recommendations, and if folks have strong sentiments towards changing in one direction or the other, happy to take feedback and integrate that into the bylaw draft. One more just to test everyone's eyes, apparently. So looking at the base zoning district, this is just showing the full row for family suite. Family suite was actually not a row in the table previously, so we're proposing to bring that in. It's referred to in several of the zoning districts in the text. We're not planning on extending this use beyond anywhere that it's currently permitted, given it's going to be a sunsetting term. But this is just showing the full row of the table for that piece. And then for assisted living facilities, in a similar vein, this row was not currently in the summary table, so we're proposing bringing that in. You'll see the zoning districts classify that by special permit or by no. There's a few yes cases. I'm seeing one in the B4, I think, is the only discrete yes by right use for assisted living. So this we are proposing to allow where nursing and convalescent homes are permitted. So if you take a look back at the full summary table, you'll see that this line mirrors where those uses are permitted, unless the text has provided some guidance otherwise to speak to that. And then the last piece here is the glossary definitions, which hopefully will be a little bit easier to read. I tried to separate them out slide by slide. A couple of them here are really just kind of housekeeping of replicating and moving to the general glossary. So accessory dwelling unit, we're referring in the general glossary as Article 2 in the bylaw. So currently, accessory dwelling units are defined in Article 8, Part 14, that refers specifically to ADUs, but if someone, say, was less familiar with navigating the subcomponents of the code, they went to the general glossary to find this term, it's not housed there currently. So essentially what we were proposing here was to copy-paste that definition, keep it in Article 8 so folks have that internal reference, but also just add that to the general glossary as a term for folks to be more mindful of when they're looking at the code, broadly speaking. The continuing care retirement center provisions are ensconced in Article 13. Interestingly, continuing care retirement center as a term is not defined within that article. All the subcomponents like assisted living facilities, independent elderly housing, congregate housing, et cetera, have definitions, but the aggregate term of CCRCs does not have a definition. So this is just a draft that I've put together here based on the purpose and intent that was articulated in Article 13, and trying to provide some clarity in terms of the components that could be encapsulated in a CCRC project, which include the housing and supportive service components of a project here. Assisted living units, as mentioned, are listed in CCRC as a definition in Article 13. We're just proposing, similar to the ADUs, to add this to the general glossary. So the first bullet point there is the existing definition. We did want to discuss with folks if there's an interest in adding the following verbiage to go a little bit more in depth into what provision of services could be included in an assisted living unit. And this is just, it's not a direct copy-paste from Methuen's code, but it kind of echoes the general spirit of services that are permitted there.
I guess the comment I would make is that this is where you might want to go back to see what was originally approved, because I could have sworn we defined all these terms way back when, and it's entirely possible through all the changes and manipulations in the bylaw, we dropped some of that stuff. Maybe I'm wrong, I could be wrong, but that was my recollection, was that it was, everyone was well-defined in a continuum between CCRC at one level, through assisted living, through congregate housing, and they were differentiated, but maybe my memory's off,
I doubt it.
yeah.
I will say in Article 13, they do still have the separate definitions for assisted living, congregate housing, independent elderly housing, and I think there's one more that they define as well. But an aggregate definition for CCRCs isn't provided in the article, so that's what the last slide was speaking to. The first bullet point you're seeing here is the existing definition we have for assisted living units.
In the CCRC bylaw.
In the
So you're right, when
CCRC bylaw.
CCRC bylaw went in, all the sub-housing types were defined. CCRC wasn't defined. So what Samantha's suggesting is the first bullet does exist in the CCR bylaw. We need to put that in the Article 2 as
Yeah,
well.
fair enough.
And she's suggesting, based on some review with Methuen, of enhancing the definition to include the lower verbiage.
Do we know why Methuen went a step further with that verbiage?
I think it's up to the discretion locally how much you want to get in the weeds in terms
Right.
of extending the glossary definition. But if there was an interest in having some established criteria or baseline where applicants might be able to go to the definition to discern what uses might be permissible on the site, that would provide more of a plug-and-play response rather than them needing to come directly before staff or the planning board to get discernment on what that glossary term could encapsulate. So you want to kind of balance between being concise but also precise if there's an interest in that component.
So that makes sense, and I appreciate that answer. I guess I'm just curious as why Methuen? Why just the one? Why not a greater cross section? And and maybe you did. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? I just, to cherry pick one just because we share a border with that particular municipality seems arbitrary, or not arbitrary. I don't mean that in a negative way. I
Yeah,
just
no,
mean
of
in
course.
a factual way. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think if there was the impetus to do that, I would just suggest maybe you take a bigger cross section.
Sure, absolutely noted. And I will say for the glossary review, I tended to look at Methuen, Andover, and Lawrence as well for cross-sharing of definitions. If there's other municipalities folks are interested in to do a cross-reference to, I'm happy to take a look. For this term in particular, Andover's was basically a one-to-one with what we currently have as our definition. Methuen was the only one of the three that went forward with a more specialized definition that they had. So that's what we were highlighting here.
Gotcha.
But definitely point taken, and I can make that clearer in the other slides.
Thank you.
And the second sentence in the existing language is confusing. It's badly worded. It just, such dwelling units may not include facilities for cooking. It may not, does that mean they won't?
They can't include
They can't
it.
have them.
Right.
Then
Yeah, right.
it may is.
Exactly right.
Anyway, so, and now what you're saying, it is the opposite of that. The Methuen language says that they may include.
So the
Right.
first bullet is, they may not include them in the dwelling unit of the elderly individual. And the second is, services may include meals and personal care. So when you're in an assisted living facility, you go to a
Okay.
cafeteria
But
often, and
not
you have a
within,
service of, you meet people for dinner, or you can have it in your room.
Okay. Well, the
It's
may
the
is.
individual's
It's the may,
dwelling
yeah.
unit. Yeah.
Well, I mean, one thing about all these, the umbrella, is it an umbrella, that retirement center, and then these other subsets or other types of, it would be nice to see how they compare, right? I mean, and I'm sure you've done that, but I mean, they are actually different, and do we have to make different accommodations for different zoning districts? I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the history of it was, this is where I want to go back and look at when we defined them, but I think the CCRC to some degree was designed with Edgewood in mind because we knew it was coming. But the thing with CCRC is that a CCRC includes that continuum of care. I mean, it includes single-family housing, apartment housing, assisted living, nursing capability, and even
Memory care.
memory care and so forth. So
Rehab.
it's a continuum. Whereas I think we wanted to differentiate that from a project that only had one of
Just a
those things.
standalone assisted
Yeah,
living facility, yeah.
so they are kind of subsets of it.
Yeah, but I have to go
side
back and look, and I think your point is, I don't know if what we did 25, 30 years ago still makes sense today. Yeah.
Then just a couple more slides here. So looking at independent elderly housing, and we can get into the weeds of that discussion of particularities of this term versus assisted living unit as well when we're thinking about doing a comprehensive review. But currently, independent elderly housing is in a similar spot. It's defined in Article 13 with the continuing care retirement centers. We're proposing bringing that definition as well to Article 2 in the general glossary. And then the bullet point here is just looking at an alternative definition. So I guess similar to what folks are saying is, are we comfortable with the terminology that was used when this was originally introduced into the bylaw, or is that something we're looking to amend or change? So just for comparison purposes, this is Andover, Mass's current definition of independent elderly housing for consideration for folks. There's some similarities to it, but I think they're emphasizing the common area component of the structures, as well as kind of the socio-environmental characteristics for residents. So there's a little bit of distinction there versus with our term that's looking at providing dwelling units that says similar to congregate housing units, so that could be a bit confusing for folks, as well as access to the supportive services element. So there might be some discussion to be had about teasing out, are those the same supportive services in assisted living units versus independent elderly housing, or do we want to make any kind of distinction between those? And currently, we're only allowing up to 5 dwelling units per structure, so do we want to keep that cap? Or leave the definition open more broadly for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think independent elderly housing was put with a cap because it was going to be available in an R4 district. And so we were, I think at the time, concerned about scale because given the normal small lot size, you didn't want to put something in that dwarfed the scale of any neighborhood that was an R4 district, so I think it was limited. But, again, I have to go back and look, but I think that was the reason why it was done.
So it's R3, just if you'd write notes, it's an R3, which is 25,000 square feet. And that's where you thought on Copplestone had some historic home that was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we designed the congregate care one around, was sort of R3, and even with that parcel in mind, even though that's not what ended up happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I will say, if we are adding this to the text for a district like R3, we could potentially put a cap in there, but if there's other districts that permit this use that we wanted to have more mobility with, that could be an option to take it out of the glossary definition, but leave that term, ensconced in R3 specifically.
Yeah.
And then nursing and convalescent home, this is kind of a simple copy paste as well. Currently the term, it's in the table of use. It's not in the general glossary. It's kind of in the all-encompassing Article 13. So we're just proposing we'll still leave all these definitions in Article 13, but make sure that we also bring those up to Article 2 so they're a little easier for folks to find. And then the last one here is congregate housing. So there are currently 2 definitions in the code referring to congregate housing. One is housed in Article 2 in the general glossary, and then there's a specific term in Article 13 for continuing care retirement facilities when they reference congregate housing. So we did just want to flag that there are those 2 definitions in place currently, and this might be an opportunity to decide on a standardized definition so we can have uniformity between Article 2 and Article 13. So the general glossary definition talks about, I guess it has the age specificity, so age 55 or older, and then it goes into some of these specific criteria of what components the congregate housing facility must include in terms of shared spaces like kitchen, dining facilities, bathing facilities, or communal spaces. And then the Article 13 definition, I guess it focuses on the privatized element of the housing. And then I guess the criteria it's looking at are a little bit different. So they're talking about what the units themselves could consist of, the amount of persons allowed in the unit, rather than the communal aspect of the facilities. So they're kind of touching on different components of that. And I think the question here is, do we want to integrate the elements of the 2? Is there one folks feel strongly about in terms of what the spirit of this permitted use entails that we want to defer to, or how we'd like to go about trying to bring some uniformity between the 2 definitions?
Or if under the CCRC umbrella, that congregate housing makes sense if you're in a CCRC, and where it's allowed in other zoning districts other than R1, R2, and village residential, which CCRCs are limited to, maybe that definition makes sense in the downtown or makes sense in R4 or wherever congregate doesn't. And so by default, if somebody came with a CCRC application, they'd have to abide by that definition. But if somebody came for an R4 application for congregate housing, it would be the glossary definition. Just another option. Okay?
That's the last slide I have for folks.
Well
so-
done.
Yeah.
Really well done job.
This is quite the Herculean effort, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Any other questions for Samantha? No? Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
So we'll work on that research, and like I said, for this particular district, we'll move forward red line with notes associated with it.
Great.
And kind of trying to target lighter agendas and move on to the next one. We've had it pretty good, I would say, this year. We're a little late in jumping onto the light agendas, but we will see.
Super. All right, so moving on to housing unit summary under discussion items.
Pass these on like this. Just take this, go on. I received an email associated with this tonight, so. All right, I got signed out during that, so give me 1 second.
It's
that is what we're on, right, housing units?
Yep.
Okay, so this was added to the agenda at Peter's request. You may recall in 2023, I believe, at about this time of the year, we had looked at this, I forget specific to what was being entertained before the board, but the assessor provided this information, we summarized, he provided a lot of detail, we summarized it down into this format. It's consistent with what we presented in '23, and honestly, the results, Peter, you can speak to it, but they haven't changed much in terms of percentages of breakout of single-family versus multifamily and condos.
And I just thought it's good to remind the board to have an awareness of what the makeup of housing units are in town. And, single family is 55%, and the rest are different types of multifamily.
Gene, is there any way to get just a retrospective look, maybe like 5 years prior, using the same table? And
Didn't we do that a while ago? Because it showed that dramatic increase in the number of multifamily over Peter, remember? Like over like a 7-year period or a 10-year period? It was huge
Yeah,
increase.
we added a lot. We had a different table that showed how many have we added over the last X years. And I think it was 7 years or 10 years, and it was over 1,000.
It was
Yeah.
since Princeton. I mean, that's easy to do.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
developments.
'Cause-
Honestly, the assessor's response to this was, it's gonna take me some time, but you
Yeah.
turned it around rather quickly, so I would rather start with the 2023 table.
Yep.
And add this, and maybe go from there.
Well, yeah, that's
rather than
fine.
back.
Yeah, I'm just curious in just terms of, you look at each category, the percent of change in each category, right?
Yeah.
I'll send everybody the 23 one, if you wanna do that comparison for this.
Okay,
And then
super.
maybe just keep this on our radar to update it next year.
All right, any other questions on the living units?
And so
report?
the email I just handed
Yep.
out, it will be added to the packet, it's now on the record, but that
Yeah,
came from
so
Melinda.
maybe I could just speak just quickly, so just for the public, so we got an email from Melinda Perrone regarding the housing units summary and development update with some concerns, and we'll post it. I won't read the whole email that we just got, but we'll post it to the meeting packet for the record. So moving on to the development update that we requested, Gene?
Yep, you at the last meeting requested, hold on, an update on 3 specific projects. So as I stated, I didn't anticipate anything changing in terms of Crest. This, as far as I'm aware, it was purchased towards the end of '25. There's no applications currently submitted before any board or commission that I'm aware of. 0 Prescott. So the zoning board did officially approve the special permit for 280 units. If you remember, the application came in at 296. My understanding is they pulled the building a little bit further away from the nearest abutter. So the abutters were very active at hearings. This is the one, John, if you remember in the site walk, I think it was only
30 feet
13 or
less,
15
yeah,
feet
it
or
was-
less. So
yeah.
I think they pulled it back 30 to 30, and that resulted in a reduction of 16 units. So essentially, this puts us over our 40B mark.
Great.
I attached the
That's big.
spreadsheet where you're gonna see, we're on the heels of the 2030 census coming up, and all the developments that you were referring to in terms of the multifamily, so Minco and Avalon were all constructed in the early 2020s, and so those become part of the denominator, and it's just an estimate. It doesn't include single-family homes, which recently, when we spoke about the 40Y zoning, I believe the number, there's only been about 5 on average single-family homes built a year, so that's not going to be a ton, but still, the denominator changes in 2030, and we really have to just keep our eye on this number. So all 280, because it's a rental development, do get added to the SHI. 70 units will be constructed affordable to the 80% of the median income. All right, and then China Blossom, I will say, is somewhat fluid, because I referenced a June 15th Select Board meeting where Princeton Properties presented a conceptual development plan and proposed a LIP, which is Local Initiative Program. It's a friendly 40B. That's what it's most commonly referred to. It would require, some diligence with the Select Board, and if they want to move forward, the Select Board's actually signing on that this does advance the housing goals of North Andover, and they actually sign the application that goes to the state for a project eligibility letter, and then it follows a similar course to the 0 Prescott Street, where it would go to the ZBA as a 40B application.
So does that mean that if you take that notion of friendly 40B, that regardless of whether we got 10%, the select board could wave through any project if they felt like it?
They can support the project in that they're signing on saying we support this going to the ZBA for review.
Right, but my point ends up being is that if you're over 10%, you can, without any equivocation, say no. But if they say yes, does that mean it goes through?
It still goes to ZBA, and the ZBA can still say no.
Can they say no?
I think so, yeah.
But, I mean, Gene, just help me understand, I mean, given that now we're over the safe harbor thresholds?
Yeah, we're in safe harbor. Once, we sent this number to the state,
Yep.
and so,
So I still don't understand how China Blossom could get a sign off from
Yeah.
the select board and then go and do a 40B and then go to the ZBA when we're under safe harbor. It just doesn't, I don't.
but that's why it's a friendly 40B, because you want to maintain your 10%.
Yep.
And
I mean, I could see, to your point that you just raised, that if you're close to the margin and the denominator might change, you may want to preemptively get ahead of it. But my point is that you could be at 20%, and if somebody came in for a friendly 40B, and the select board said, oh, that's a good idea, is that the end? That's my point.
But the select board retains the authority to be able to say, yes, we want
that they
more.
support the application before them. So it might be just in the ideal location and
No, but
meet
my
whatever-
point is, what they're doing is they're overriding zoning. I mean, they don't have that prerogative like with Royal Crest or anything like that.
they didn't, because that was going to be a bylaw zoning amendment. It would
No,
go to town
but
meeting.
and that's my point is, I think the answer is that regardless of whether you're 10% or more, if they say this is a friendly 40B, nobody else can opine on it.
It would go through the same 40B process with the ZBA.
Yeah, but you can't decline it.
I think you make an assumption, but I think they could. They could.
Well, very hard. Yeah,
Very hard.
very hard.
So I also included a spreadsheet that Andrew Shapiro put together. He followed the 40B process. He was part of it. And so if you look at the bottom of the spreadsheet, Joe, when you say the denominator is going to change, so we're talking in 2030. So we have 948 units currently on the SHI. This brings us to 1,246. Our estimated 2030 year-round housing jumps to 12,500 because it adds in the developments just ahead of it. 149 Main, 1591 Osgood, Avalon, both phases, and Minco, for a total of 411 additional housing units. So 12,571, we're at 991 in 2030 potentially. So, and like I said, that doesn't include the single-family homes, but this is just a number we need to stay well aware of.
Yeah. No, I think that's good that you do that. I think that is, I mean, I think you can make a strong argument that if this takes us under, maybe we should take that offer. So I'm not
Yep.
unequivocally against the idea
Yep, so
in this case.
So what I was saying is fluid, so they came back on June 14th, they were there last night, well, Princeton wasn't there, but the town manager and Andrew gave an update, and so it's fluid in that,
Are
and
they
this
going to
update.
ask us our opinion?
I'm sorry?
Are they going to ask us our opinion, whether it's a good idea?
I don't know. I'm not going to speak for them, but what it was is, there's going to be a survey. There is going to be public input. The select board want public input, so likely that'll be in the form of a survey. There could be other forms as well. but the conceptual plan was revised, and rather than 124 units, it's down to 108 units, one building instead of two building. So that's, I'm just trying to say, it's fluid. There's nothing in stone here. This is just the beginning of conversations. And given that it's dead center summer, I wouldn't anticipate public outreach. I would advocate for, if we do it in August, do it again in September, but to make sure we capture post-summer as well. So it could be open for a long time, it could be sent twice, I'm not sure what method they're going to go with, but the next step is public outreach.
Yeah. Aren't they proposing a restaurant too?
Yep, a standalone 3,500 square foot.
So how does that work with a 40B project that's supposed to be
You
purely
can-
residential? Is that possible?
No, there's a provision, you can have commercial. I've always thought it was 10% of the square footage.
Okay.
But I've been told it has more to do with the financial component, the pro forma. I'm not sure which is right, but you can have a small footprint of commercial.
Okay.
I would just, if you're very interested in this one, I would follow the select board agenda. I think it's going to be on it. I think it'll be on it fairly often. So.
Thank you for pulling this together,
Yeah.
Jean. That's super helpful.
Thanks, Gene.
Yep.
All right. Meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any other topics? I don't see any on the agenda. Can I get a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Well done.